close Brad Branson, who graduated North Fort Myers High in 1976, became a junior college All-American who played most of 2 seasons in the NBA and for 12 years in Europe. Now he's home to support his former community and former coach, Hugh Thimlar. Seth Soffian, news-press.com, read, oddly square banner hanging in the dimly lit auxiliary gym at North Fort Myers High School bears his name and jersey number but little else. Brad Branson, 50, it's perfectly symbolic. For Southwest Florida residents and others of his generation, the 1976 North High graduate and former NBA player is a well-known source of community pride. For many others, though, he is unknown, something of an oddity given a sports culture fixated on getting there, or making it, and given what select company he is in locally. A banner hangs in the auxiliary gym at North Fort Myers High School commemorating 1976 Red Knights graduate Brad Branson, who wore no. 50 and later played a season and a half in the NBA and a dozen in Europe. Photo, Seth Soffian, news-press.com, an athletic, prototypical stretch 4. Before such a term became common, the 6'10" Branson worked his way into steady minutes with the Indiana Pacers in 1982-83 before choosing to spend the bulk of his career in Europe, where he played at the top level. Now, after a post-playing career in broadcasting and other work, he's come home to be with the aging coach 93-year-old Hugh Thimlar. He says made it all possible with the simplest of approaches, believing in him. He's also home to support the community in which he and his 2 younger siblings were raised by Virginia Branson, a longtime Lee County educator, and stepfather Ted Branson, a former Marine. This is all about paying it back, said Branson, 60, his low, booming voice with a Spanish lilt echoing at North Fort Myers, where he teaches philanthropy and online recovery classes and is an assistant coach for the girls' basketball team. I had a great career and met a lot of good people. I've been really blessed. And that's why I'm here. If I can help, I like what I see. Stories from Branson's career are a treat for hoops fans, intersecting with a who's who from earlier eras, Larry Bird and Julius Erving, Artis Gilmore and Bill Laimbeer, Drazen Petrovic and Arvydas Sabonis. Going back further, Hoosiers icons Branch McCracken and Bobby Leonard. But none would have been possible without 2 encounters years earlier in North Fort Myers. Branson's biological father, Lou Scott, was a 6'11", key player on Indiana's 1953 NCAA title team, coached by Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Famer McCracken. In the late 1960s, after Thimlar brought his own Indiana basketball roots to Florida to coach, including for 26 years at what is now Florida Southwestern State College, Leonard, one of the stars of the 1953 Hoosiers squad, told Thimlar that Scott's son was living in the Fort Myers area, and he would be good. Except that no young man of notable height with the last name Scott was to be found. For years. That was until Bill Geddes, a coaching confidant to Thimlar and later the longtime principal at Cypress Lake High, crossed paths with Virginia Branson, who had remarried and moved to Florida with her 3 young kids, and learned his last name wasn't Scott. She goes, "Yeah, I know where he is," Branson said of his mother, now in her late 80s and living with Branson's younger brother in New Orleans. They say at least 2 or 3 years he was looking. That brings up the other story from Branson's youth. He wasn't any good. I was skinny, uncoordinated, wore braces, not a very confident person, he said. I was so bad, they would laugh. I would fall over the free throw line. Even as a senior at North, Branson said he only got to play because the University of Georgia told Red Knights teammate Robert Goodwin, later an assistant athletic director in Athens, that it would pull his football scholarship if he got hurt playing basketball. Only Thimlar, whose resume at what was then Edison Community College included producing 5 junior college All-Americans, offered a scholarship to Branson. But it came with a condition: old-school self-help. Every morning when you brush your teeth, Branson said Thimlar told him, I want you to look in the mirror and say, I like what I see, I believe in myself, and I believe in what I can do, and that's why I'm here. More, please. FSW, name basketball court for Hugh Thimlar. Hugh Thimlar, coach for 26 years at what was then Edison Community College, was honored. Deck. 1, 2017, during a ceremony at Suncoast Credit Union Arena at Florida Southwestern State College. Photo, Tissa Mortensen. Special to the news press, Branson grew 4 inches his 2 years at Edison, reaching 6 to 10 as a sophomore. He also worked his tail off playing outdoor pickup games off Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard with teammates like Richard Glasper, who was from LaBelle and would join a number of Thimlar's other former Chargers at Florida, and Robert Jenkins, a Riverdale High graduate who went on to Bradley. What made the biggest difference, though, was Thimlar. Branson said, "I grew into my body, I jumped a lot of rope and I started believing in myself," he said, "because I finally had somebody who believed in me, and that was Coach. And that was contagious. Can you imagine? It's instructive in understanding how good a player Branson would become to know that he said he declined a 3-year contract offer from the Pacers in 1983 in favor of a 3-year deal, for 3 times the money and other perks, in Italy. Before that, though, he'd developed into a junior college first-team All-America as a sophomore, opening the door to a life he never expected. Many expected him to follow most of Thimlar's top players to Gainesville, where Thimlar's son, Terry, also was an assistant coach in 1977-78. Branson also visited Texas, Tennessee, Bradley, South Carolina, Wake Forest and Pepperdine, the latter just on a pleasure visit, Indiana State, where Larry Bird was entering a senior season that would end with a historic national championship game showdown with Michigan State and Magic Johnson, also wanted Branson. But Hugh Thimlar, as Branson recalls it, ran interference on Sycamore's coach Bill Hodges when he tried to get Branson to visit Terre Haute. "Now we laugh about it," said Branson, still close also with Hodges, 75, who Branson said is still coaching in Orlando. "I told him I would have loved to have played with Bird. Can you imagine?" Branson's voice turns gravely, imitating Hodges on the question of whether the Sycamores 31-0 going into the title game, but beaten 75-64 by the Spartans when Bird was held to just 7 of 21 of shooting, might have won with his help. "Ah, heck, I knew it wasn't right," Branson said of Thimlar's interference and Hodges' answer. "But look, you ended up in the NBA. You played all over the world. It went well. You didn't need to play up at Indiana State." For Thimlar, Branson has zero criticism of how things played out. "He's most definitely my father figure," he said. "He also taught us, once you make a decision, you never look back. I've been very blessed." Pony Excess instead of Florida, where Branson said his signing was considered such a formality that he said Gators coach John Lotz didn't even visit with him. He ended up signing with Southern Methodist. That was when SMU football was committing major recruiting violations that would lead to the program receiving the infamous death penalty from the NCAA in 1987. Branson's 2 seasons in Dallas overlapped with those of SMU star running backs Eric Dickerson and Craig James of Pony Express fame, later chronicled Pony Excess by ESPN's 30 for 30. "Everybody thought I was bought," he laughed. "We had a saying, football players drove Mercedes and BMWs, but basketball players drove Pontiacs. But we did drive the Trans Am with T-tops." Branson said he never actually received anything and chose SMU for the education and smaller size. But he also thrived in Mustangs coach Sonny Allen's famously relentless up-tempo attack. "It was good for me. I could run and I could shoot. I jumped pretty good," he said, recalling his later success in Europe, beating 7'3" Lithuanian center Arvydas Sabonis, later of the Portland Trail Blazers, up and down the floor. "Back then there were true centers. And I could outrun centers. He was a fantastic player. But he just wouldn't run." Deserved to be a member of the gold medal winning team at the National Sports Festival in Colorado Springs in 1979, Branson was one of 36 amateurs picked for final tryouts for the 1980 U.S. Olympic team, which never came to be because of the American boycott. But those 36 were split into 3 teams to compete for the United States in multi-week tours of the United States, the Caribbean, and Europe. Branson chose Europe, where he'd soon play his first professional season after being drafted in the 2nd round, 45th overall, by the Detroit Pistons in 1980. "I didn't even know where to get a passport," he said. But I thought it would be great. Pistons general manager Jack McCloskey, architect of Detroit's two-time title-winning Bad Boys teams a decade later, encouraged Branson to spend a season in Europe, which he did in Rimini in coastal northern Italy. He was traded to Dallas when he returned and was one of the last camp cuts for the 1981-82 season, leading him to the Continental Basketball Association's Anchorage Northern Knights in Alaska. But after being named Defensive MVP of the mid-season CBA All-Star Game at the Meadowlands right before the NBA All-Star Game, Branson was signed by Cleveland coach Bill Musselman and spent the rest of the season with the Cavaliers. I didn't play a lot until the end of the season. I had to learn, said Branson, who by then had beefed up close to his regular playing weight of about 280 pounds, still not enough to handle the likes of the 7'2", 300-plus pound Gilmore. I tried to front him one time, and he just lifted me off the ground. I'm like, I'm not going in there anymore. The infamously rough Lambier gave him another sample of NBA play back then. He set a pick on me and just blindsided me, Branson said. I respect him because I respect all players. But he was the dirtiest player I ever played against. Branson's first NBA statistic was ominous, a turnover thanks to Irving refusing to let Branson seal him on a switch in the post and Branson taking his eye off the entry pass. Running back down the floor, though, drive. Jay showed greatness doesn't have to mean a lack of class, helping a young player unsure of his place. He goes, "You're here now. You deserve to be here." Like everybody else, Branson said. Fun in Europe. Branson averaged 17.6 minutes, 5.3 points and 3.3 rebounds in 10 games with 3 starts for Cleveland but was traded to Indiana going into the 1982-83 season. With the Pacers, he averaged 11.2 minutes, 5.5 points and 2.8 rebounds in 62 games. He said he excelled in 2 starts. He got late in the season due to injury and was offered a 3-year extension. But when his former coach in Rimini offered 3 times the money, with his taxes paid, free housing, a car and other perks, to play in Brescia, also in northern Italy at the foot of the Alps, Branson's NBA days were done. I came from being booed and laughed at my high school, senior year to making it to the NBA, and doing well, being recognized. I was satisfied, he said. The other thing was I really had fun in Europe. At that time the NBA was a very physical game. Now everybody runs and guns. After 3 seasons in Brescia, Branson signed with European royalty Real Madrid, less famed but more successful even than the Spanish club's soccer counterpart. It was like playing with the Lakers or Celtics, said Branson, who became well known in Spain for diving for loose balls, taking charges and more hustle stats. We were always in the league finals. After 2 seasons in Madrid, Branson was released when Petrovic was signed and took up what was one of 2 slots allotted to foreigners. Real Madrid also had resigned 6'9" Spaniard Fernando Martin, who had played 1 year with Portland and, tragically like Petrovic 4 years later, also died in car crash in Europe in 1989. Branson moved on to Valencia, where he spent 6 years and built a life. He opened restaurants and participated in charity events, including the Special Olympics basketball work he has continued at North Fort Myers. With his first wife, Branson has a 27-year-old daughter, who is director of events and marketing for his former team in Valencia. With his second wife, who lives in Miami and from whom he is divorced, he has a son in 11th grade and daughter in 9th grade, both at North Fort Myers. After quietly returning to Texas in 1998 for treatment for what he called a tuberculosis-type blood infection, Branson ran car dealerships for 6 years and then went into management of Spanish-language TV and radio stations. That ultimately brought him back to Florida 2 years ago and now to his former home, where he's hardly anonymous to his peers. It's an old saying, time is a passage. It's part of the process. Terry Thimlar, 65 and athletic director at Island Coast High, said of Branson's relative anonymity, "But Brad was a good player. He wasn't just a guy on the bench. I saw him introduced in starting lineups. He listened to people, and he worked and developed into a player. Love of humanity. Branson, who tries to see his former coach at least once a week, has credit for 2 seasons played with the NBA Players Association. And he is active with the National Basketball Retired Players Association, including in its charity outreach work. At North Fort Myers, though, he doesn't think that entitles him to any special attention. Rather, he embraces the same service to others that changed his world. Such a powerful speech given to our student-athletes today. Folded hands, clapping hands. Brad Branson, former NBA basketball flex biceps player, gave a wonderful message about the importance of sports and of college education. He also advised the students with the way they treat others and the impact it has on their lives. pic.twitter.com/1v8Nevgrit, Sanchez Casal, Florida, Addis, Florida, May 24, 2018. Physically he intimidates you because he's super tall and built, and he's got this deep voice, said 2018 North graduate Sahari Jones, home from college helping volunteer with the girls' basketball team while she recovers from a softball injury. But then you have a single conversation with him and you find out he's one of the most kind-hearted people. He's the kind of person, whether you're a player or not, you just want to be around. He's already done so much for our team, without anybody asking. Red Knights coach Stephanie Rail said of Branson, president of the Red Knights Booster Club, he's gotten donations, and he's looking for ways to build up the program, all of his own initiative. He just goes and does it himself. Branson recently volunteered to coach a team at the North Fort Myers Recreation Center. When play starts next month, it could mean a lot to a kid, he said. Working with North players on post moves and boxing out at practice recently, Branson was clear and calm, offering corrections but encouragement at the same time. His nondescript banner hung nearby. It was perfect symbolism. Philanthropy is the love of humanity, he said. It's the little things that count. Follow at news-press.comThe on Twitter.